My 6-year-old son mocked my father, the same man who raised me with nothing but love and patience. He said Grandpa was too quiet and too boring to be any fun. And the worst part? My mother-in-law laughed. She laughed like it was a joke. But it wasn't. It was the moment something broke inside me. I had spent years letting her disrespect my father, swallowing the insults, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But when I saw my own child inherit her cruelty, I realized silence wasn't protection anymore. It was permission, and I was done giving it. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I used to think strength was something you had to announce. Like the loudest voice in the room automatically belonged to the strongest person. Maybe that was the kind of thinking I picked up from my wife's side of the family, where volume was power and silence was weakness. But then again, I grew up watching a man move mountains without ever raising his voice. My father. My dad wasn't the kind of man people noticed right away. He had this stillness about him, like an old tree, quiet, dependable, never needing the spotlight. He worked 37 years in maintenance for the school district, never once calling out sick, never once complaining about the pay or the politics. He came home, took his boots off at the door, and kissed my mom like he was still trying to win her heart after all these years. He didn't say much, but when he did, it meant something. That's what I learned growing up. Words weren't cheap. They were earned. Now I'm 38, married with 2 kids of my own, and somehow I find myself forgetting those lessons in the noise of everyday life. My wife, Jenna, she's brilliant and beautiful and sharp-tongued, quick to speak, quicker to correct. Her mother, Patricia, well, she's a force of nature. The kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately tells you how it could be rearranged better. She never liked my dad. Said he was a little too slow for her taste. She didn't mean intellectually. She meant he didn't talk fast enough, didn't respond quick enough, didn't play the game the way she did. At first, I brushed it off as cultural differences, her family being more extroverted, mine more reserved. But deep down, I think I always knew Patricia saw my father as less than. And that knowledge sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't quite dislodge. I should have spoken up sooner. God knows there were chances. But Dad always gave me that same look, the one that said, "Let it go, son. It's not worth it." And maybe I trusted that too much. Trusted his ability to absorb the jabs, to turn the other cheek, even when the insults were thinly veiled. I thought he was invincible in his silence. The real problem started when we hosted that Sunday dinner. It was supposed to be casual. Just our little family, me, Jenna, our 2 kids, and both sets of grandparents. My dad had just turned 70, and we thought it would be nice to cook a meal in his honor. Nothing big. A roast chicken, mashed potatoes, something comforting. I watched him sit at the head of the table, smiling quietly as the kids brought over their drawings and Jenna poured him a glass of wine. "Say something, Charles," Patricia said suddenly, halfway through dinner. "You're so quiet. People might think you're mute." Everyone laughed, except my dad. He smiled politely and looked down at his plate. I forced a smile too. "He's just taking it all in," I said, trying to lighten the mood. But Patricia wasn't done. I mean, really. You'd think after 70 years, a man would have more to say. How do you expect to connect with your grandchildren if you don't even talk? My 6-year-old son, Levi, looked up from his plate. "Yeah, Grandpa, why don't you talk more?" There was no malice in his voice, just curiosity. But the room froze for a second. My dad's hand paused halfway to his glass. He didn't flinch, didn't frown, just kept that same soft expression like he'd heard it all before. "Levi," I said sharply, "that's not how we talk to Grandpa." But Mom said, "That's enough." My voice came out firmer than I expected. Jenna gave me a look. Not angry, more like surprised. Patricia raised her eyebrows. "It's just a question. Kids are naturally curious." I looked at my father. He was nodding slowly, still avoiding everyone's eyes. "It's all right," he said quietly. "He's just a boy." But something cracked inside me right then. Not all at once. Not like thunder. More like a hairline fracture spreading under pressure. I saw the way my dad folded into himself. How the same man who used to lift me onto his shoulders after long shifts now shrank under the weight of someone else's judgment. And I hated myself for letting it happen, for watching it happen. After dinner, I offered to walk him to his car. "It's fine," he said, gently patting my arm. "Don't stir things up." "But it's not fine, Dad." He smiled at me like he was looking at the boy I used to be. "She's your wife's mother. Just let it go. She's all bark, no bite." I didn't say anything. Just watched him drive away with that same calm demeanor, that same quiet strength that had raised me. But as I stood in the driveway, the weight of everything hit me like a fist to the ribs. Because this wasn't just about dinner. It wasn't even about Patricia. It was about what kind of man I was becoming, what kind of father I was being. If I let my son think it was okay to mock a man like mine, what did that say about the values I was passing down? I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside Jenna, listening to the low hum of the fan and the soft rustle of leaves outside. My mind kept replaying that moment, my son's voice, my mother-in-law's laughter, my father's silence. "He's just a boy," Dad had said. But that boy was watching. He was listening. And if I didn't do something, he'd learn the wrong lesson about what strength looked like. It was one of those Sundays that should have felt like a victory lap. You know the kind, when the roast comes out golden, the house smells like garlic and rosemary, and the kids are still in their church clothes long enough to impress the grandparents. We'd spent most of the morning prepping the house. Jenna fussed over the table setting while I vacuumed the living room for the second time. Our daughter, Talia, had drawn little place cards with everyone's names in shaky crayon cursive. She gave my father's a little crown. "Because he's the oldest," she'd said proudly, handing it to me. That little gesture? That was the part that got to me later. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. I just placed the card at the head of the table and hoped the roast wasn't dry. Everyone arrived a little after 4. Patricia was, as always, 10 minutes late and 15 decibels too loud. She swept into the house like she owned it, sunglasses still on, perfume trailing behind her like fog in a haunted house. "Oh, this smells quaint," she said, taking a quick glance at the dining room before turning to kiss Jenna on the cheek. "You really should try that lemon thyme chicken I told you about. So much more elevated." My dad came in quietly behind her, holding a small bouquet of supermarket flowers he'd clearly picked up on the way. He gave them to Jenna with that same humble smile he wore at every holiday gathering. She thanked him politely, though I noticed she didn't put them in water right away. Dinner started fine. Levi cracked a joke about broccoli looking like tiny trees, and everyone laughed. My dad complimented the food, told Jenna she cooked like her heart was in it. It was the kind of thing only my dad could say without sounding cheesy. He always meant it. Every word. But then came the moment I should have seen coming. Patricia took a sip of her wine and looked across the table at him. "You know, Charles," she said, swirling her glass like she was on some talk show panel, "I still can't figure you out. You just sit there so quiet all the time. Do you even enjoy these things?" He smiled softly. "Of course. I'm just listening." "To what?" she laughed. "The clinking of forks? Honestly, I don't know how you raised a son like Daniel. He talks more in 5 minutes than you do all year." I saw Jenna shoot her mother a warning glance, but Patricia kept going. "I mean, it's a wonder your grandkids know who you are. Don't you ever think you should speak up more? Be more engaging?" My father set down his fork, not with force, just a quiet placement like he wanted to pause time. "I believe in letting others lead the conversation," he said gently. Patricia scoffed. "That's not leadership, Charles. That's hiding." I cleared my throat. "All right, maybe we should just." But that's when Levi, in his tiny 6-year-old voice, decided to join in. "Grandpa's not fun. He's too quiet. He's boring." He grinned as he said it. Thought he was being funny. Patricia laughed loudly, too loudly, and clapped a hand on the table. "See? Even the kids pick up on it." My dad didn't move, didn't flinch. He just looked at his plate like maybe if he stayed still long enough, the moment would pass. But something inside me twisted, hard. It was like watching someone slap a saint. And I know how that sounds. Overly dramatic maybe, but there's no other way to describe it. My father, the man who built my childhood with his calloused hands and quiet sacrifices, was being mocked in his own grandson's voice. And worse, laughed at by the woman who should have shown him basic respect. "Levi," I said, sharper than I intended. Apologize to Grandpa. He blinked at me, surprised. But Mom laughed. I said apologize. Jenna jumped in then, trying to smooth it over. Daniel, it's okay. He's just repeating what he hears. Exactly, I snapped. And what he hears is poison. The table went dead silent. Even Patricia froze for a second, her wine glass halfway to her lips. My dad, ever the peacekeeper, raised his hand like a referee. It's all right. No harm done. No, I said, my voice firmer now. There is harm. You just won't say it. Jenna stood up, eyes wide. Can we not do this at dinner? But it was too late. The crack had already splintered all the way through. Patricia leaned back in her chair, unfazed. Oh, come on, Daniel. Don't be so dramatic. Kids repeat things. It's natural. Maybe if your father tried harder to connect with them. That man, I cut in, standing now, pointing toward my dad, taught me everything I needed to be a good father. And not once did he do it by talking over people or humiliating them. Maybe you think that's weakness, Patricia, but I call it grace. Her mouth opened, ready to fire back, but I held up my hand. Don't. Just don't. You've been passive-aggressively tearing him down for years. And I let you. Because he asked me to. Because he didn't want drama. But you crossed a line tonight. You let my son believe that it's okay to disrespect his grandfather. And that will not happen again. Jenna was holding her breath, eyes bouncing between me and her mother like a referee waiting to call a foul. My dad stood slowly. I think it's time I head out. Dad. He looked at me with something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Pride, sadness, gratitude, all tangled together. You said what needed saying, he whispered. And then he left. I followed him out to his car, again. But this time, I didn't try to stop him. I just stood there as he pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the road. When I walked back in, the table was half cleared. Patricia was gone, apparently having stormed out while I was outside. Jenna was standing at the sink, shoulders tight. Did it have to go like that? She asked quietly. Yeah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It did. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just protecting my dad. I was becoming him. It had been 5 days since that dinner. 5 long, simmering days. The kind where everything looks normal on the surface. Breakfast eaten, laundry folded, school runs made. But underneath, something is bubbling. Waiting. I could feel it in my chest like pressure behind a dam. I kept telling myself I'd handled it. That I stood up, said my piece, drew a line in the sand. But what I didn't realize was that the ripple effects hadn't stopped with Patricia. They were moving through my own home now. Quieter, more insidious. It was Friday afternoon when it finally happened. I'd come home early from work to surprise the kids. Thought we could maybe do a movie night or head to the park before dinner. Jenna was on a call in the bedroom. I walked in through the garage, still smelling like sawdust and office coffee, and heard them in the living room. Talia was coloring on the floor. Levi was playing with his action figures. And then, clear as day, I heard him say it again. Grandpa's too quiet. That's why he's no fun. He said it with a little sneer this time. A tone. Not innocent mimicry like before. This was performance. Rehearsed. And worse, approved. Talia giggled. He just sits there and eats. Levi laughed. Yeah, like a statue. Maybe he's not even real. I froze in the hallway. My heart didn't just sink. It detonated. I walked into the room slowly. Where did you hear that? Levi blinked up at me. What? What you just said. About Grandpa. He shrugged. Mom says it. She says he's boring. That he doesn't know how to play. I looked over at Talia. She was already looking away, guilty. Have you said that to him? To Grandpa. No, Levi mumbled. Only when he's not here. And that's when it hit me. They weren't just parroting words. They were learning shame. Learning cruelty. And they were learning it at home. From someone I had allowed too close for too long. I crouched down in front of Levi, my hands trembling as I tried to keep my voice steady. Listen to me. Your grandpa is not boring. He is not weak. He is not someone we make fun of. Do you know who helped me when I fell off my bike and cracked my knee open? Grandpa. Do you know who came to every baseball game I ever played? Even the ones where I struck out 5 times in a row? Grandpa. He's quiet because he listens. Because he's kind. And because he knows that love doesn't have to be loud. Levi's face crumpled. Not into a tantrum, but confusion. Maybe even guilt. He looked small, unsure. But it wasn't enough to undo what had already been done. Jenna walked in just as I was standing up. "What's going on?" she asked, still tucking her phone into her back pocket. I turned to her slowly. "Your mother's words are in our son's mouth." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "Daniel. No. Don't Daniel me right now. This is exactly what I was afraid of. It's not just disrespect, it's shaping how they see him, how they speak to him, how they think it's okay to treat someone who's different. She doesn't mean harm." She laughed when he insulted my father. "He's a kid." "No, Jenna." She laughed. She encouraged it. "And now Levi thinks it's funny to mock a man who's done nothing but love this family." There was a beat of silence. Then Jenna's voice softened. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to admit she crossed a line. I want you to stop protecting her when she hurts people." Jenna's jaw tightened. "She's my mom, and he's my father." Tension hung between us like a curtain no one wanted to pull back. "I never asked you to choose," I said quietly. "But I'm telling you now, if she can't respect him, she doesn't come around the kids. Period." Jenna's eyes flared. "You're not going to tell me who my children see." I stepped closer, my voice low but unwavering. "If someone mocked your father in front of our kids, you'd burn the house down. Don't ask me to do less." She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift. Not full agreement. Not yet. But understanding. The kind that comes when love is pressed against its own blind spots. "I need time," she said. "You have it," I replied. "But the rule stands. She doesn't get access until we deal with this." That night, I called my dad. He answered on the second ring, voice calm as ever. "Hey, son." I paused. "I want to apologize." "For what?" "For not protecting you sooner." There was a long silence. Then, "You protected me the best way you knew how." But it wasn't enough. It was what I needed. Until now. I swallowed hard. Levi repeated what she said. "Mocked you." My dad let out a slow breath. "He's just a kid." "No. He's my kid. And I'm going to make sure he knows better." There was a pause. "That means a lot to me, Daniel." "Really?" I sat on the back steps, phone pressed to my ear, staring out into the dark yard. "I don't know how you did it, Dad. All those years, staying quiet." "Because I knew who I was. And I didn't need to prove it to anyone." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because I was angry, and proud, and broken, and whole, all at once. "You deserved better," I whispered. "So do you," he said. "And so do your kids. So teach them, even if it costs you." When I hung up, the silence felt different. Not empty, just earned. There's a kind of quiet that feels like failure. But then there's another kind, the kind that comes after you've told the truth. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you feel, finally, like you're standing on solid ground. There's a moment in every man's life when he stops caring about keeping the peace and starts caring about keeping his soul. For me, it came 3 days after Levi repeated those words, after I had sat with the weight of it, felt it in my chest like a sickness. I couldn't shake the image of my father, sitting still and gentle at that dinner table, being picked apart like some sort of defective appliance. And I couldn't stomach the idea of my kids growing up thinking that what they saw was okay. That love could be measured by how loud it was. That decency was something you could laugh at. I told Jenna I wanted to talk. She agreed, hesitantly, and said we should go to her mother's house to clear the air. I knew what that meant. She wanted to mediate, keep things calm, keep the storm from turning into a flood. But I wasn't interested in mediation. I wasn't coming with questions. I was coming with truth. We arrived at Patricia's home around 6. The kids stayed with my sister. It was the kind of late afternoon where the sun hangs low like it's waiting for something to break. Jenna rang the bell, and the door swung open like it had been unlocked the whole time. "Come in," Patricia said, wearing that same smile she wore at my wedding. The one that said, "I'll tolerate you for now." We sat in her overly white living room. Everything was too pristine. Like if you breathed wrong, the walls would flinch. "I'm guessing this is about Sunday," she said, folding her legs and crossing her arms. "No," I said. "This is about the last 5 years." Patricia tilted her head. "Excuse me. I've let you talk about my father like he's disposable. Like he's an afterthought in his own son's life. And I've let it go, time and time again, because he asked me to. Because he's more gracious than I'll ever be. But you crossed a line. And we're not doing this anymore." Jenna sat between us. eyes bouncing nervously from me to her mother. Patricia scoffed. Oh, please. I joked with him. That's all. If he's so fragile. It wasn't a joke. You don't joke about people's worth. You don't let a 6-year-old mimic your insults and call it playful. She leaned forward. So now I'm the villain because your father doesn't know how to speak up for himself. No, I said calmly. You're the villain because you knew he wouldn't speak up, and you used that to humiliate him. Jenna finally spoke. Mom, I think you need to hear him. But Patricia waved her off. You know what I think? I think Daniel is projecting. He's ashamed of his father's meekness, and instead of facing that, he's putting it on me. I stood up, not abruptly, just with intention. I'm not ashamed of my father. I'm ashamed of myself for ever letting you near him. Her eyes narrowed. How dare you? No, Patricia. How dare you? You stepped into my home, insulted a man who's done nothing but love his grandchildren, and now you're shocked that I'm setting a boundary? Here it is, plainly. Until you can sincerely apologize to him, to his face, and commit to treating him with the respect he's always deserved, you are not welcome around my children. Jenna's breath caught. Daniel. But I looked at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't asking for her to back me. I was telling her where I stood. This isn't negotiable. Patricia stood too. Well, if that's how you feel, maybe you should think twice about who you married into. I've thought about it, I said, and I'd marry Jenna again, but I'd never let you this close. She went quiet. That was the first time I'd ever seen her blink, genuinely unsure of what to say. Because I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't break things. I was just done. Jenna and I left in silence. We didn't talk on the ride home, but the silence wasn't cold. It was necessary. That night, I sat on the back porch with a beer, and Jenna came out barefoot, arms folded. She said you embarrassed her, she said quietly. I looked up. Good. She also said, you reminded her of your dad. My chest tightened. She meant it as an insult? Jenna sat next to me. Yes, but I didn't take it that way. The cicadas buzzed in the trees. The world kept turning. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner, she whispered. I'm sorry I let it go on so long, I replied. We sat there for a long time. No more words. No need. Sometimes, the loudest thing a man can do is choose silence when it comes from strength. And in that silence, I finally felt like a father. It started small. The kind of ripple you almost don't notice until it spreads wide enough to pull you under. First, it was the cousins. Jenna's cousin Mindy unfollowed me on Instagram. Big deal, right? But then I noticed she removed me from the group chat where we used to plan birthdays. Next came the silence. Not tension, not argument. Just nothing. Jenna's sister, who used to send me TikToks at midnight about dad life, stopped texting altogether. And then I got the message. Hey Dan, just wanted to say we love you guys, but maybe next time we do family dinner without the drama? It was signed with a peace sign emoji. No name, no context, just passive aggression wrapped in fake concern. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The lines were being drawn. Patricia had started her campaign. Subtle, quiet enough not to be called gossip, but just loud enough to shift the temperature in the room before we ever walked into it. She'd painted herself as the victim, said I'd berated an old woman in her own home, that I'd threatened to keep the kids away over one harmless joke. Jenna heard some of it from her aunt, then more from her childhood friend, who works with Patricia at the community center. She's making it sound like you yelled at her, Jenna told me one night, tossing her phone onto the coffee table. Like you screamed and slammed doors. Of course she is, I said, because the truth makes her look small. So she's inflating the story to make herself feel big again. Jenna didn't argue. She didn't defend her mother. But she didn't say much at all, and that silence worried me more than anything. I kept waiting for her to crack, to break down and say, you were right. We needed this boundary. But instead, she just got quieter, went through the motions, smiled less. One night, after the kids were asleep, I asked her, are you mad at me? She took a while to answer. I'm not mad. I'm just sad. That hit harder than any argument could have. I feel like I'm losing my family, she said. I leaned forward. You're not. But maybe you're seeing them clearly for the first time. She shook her head. You don't understand. I grew up with Mom being the center of everything. Every birthday, every Christmas, she planned it all. She's the one who held people together. No, she controlled people. There's a difference. Jenna didn't respond to that, just stared at her hands, her wedding ring spinning slowly around her finger. She's not going to change, I said gently. But we can. I know, she whispered. I just wish it didn't feel like a war. I reached out and took her hand. It's not a war. It's a rescue. That weekend, Levi asked when he'd see Mom again. He asked like it was a throwaway question, like he was talking about a cartoon character. But I saw Jenna flinch. I sat down with him and explained again, calmly, clearly, that Mom had said some things that weren't kind, and until she apologized, we were going to take some space. Is Grandpa mad at her? He asked. No, I said. Grandpa doesn't get mad like that. But it hurt him. And when someone hurts the people we love, we don't pretend it didn't happen. Levi nodded slowly. I was mean too. You were just learning. But now you know better. He crawled into my lap and rested his head on my chest. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Maybe this was what generational change looked like, not dramatic speeches or viral social media posts. Just one conversation, one correction, one child realizing it's okay to be quiet and still be strong. A few days later, I got a voicemail. It was Patricia. Daniel, she began, her voice a little softer than usual. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I made Charles feel. And maybe I got carried away. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I really didn't. Well, I'm sorry if I embarrassed him. That wasn't my intention. There was a pause. I hope you'll reconsider. I miss the kids. And I miss Jenna. Call me back. I played it for Jenna. She listened with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She didn't apologize, Jenna said. Not really. Nope. She said if she embarrassed him. She's not sorry. She's trying to get back in without accountability. Jenna sighed. So what now? That depends, I said, on whether we're building a family on truth or just tradition. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, don't call her back. And that was the moment I knew something in her had finally shifted too. There was this moment, about a week after Patricia's voicemail, when I walked into my garage and saw something that stopped me cold. My dad, old work jeans, flannel shirt, worn hands, was kneeling next to Levi on the concrete floor, showing him how to use a small handsaw. They were building something. A birdhouse, I think. Levi was holding the wood steady, tongue poked out in concentration, while my father guided his hand, slow and steady. They didn't say much, just murmurs, instructions, a shared smile now and then. But the silence between them wasn't empty. It was sacred, and I stood there, unnoticed for a while, just watching the man who raised me raise my son, quietly, gently, with more strength in his stillness than anyone else I'd ever known. And I thought this is the real inheritance. It wasn't the garage tools or the heirlooms or the money in his retirement fund. It was this legacy of presence, of integrity, of never using volume as a substitute for value. Later that night, I sat with him on the back porch, 2 beers between us, the fall air creeping in around the edges of the day. You didn't have to come over, I told him. I wanted to, he said simply. Figured you could use a hand. I nodded. Levi's listening now. He smiled, not in pride, but in peace. Kids will always pick up what we whisper, he said, even more than what we shout. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he had never needed defending. Not really. He had always stood on ground I was just now learning how to walk. I didn't protect you soon enough, I said. He shook his head. You did it exactly when it mattered most. We sat in silence, sipping beer, listening to the wind move through the trees like old ghosts brushing against the past. I got a voicemail from Patricia, I said finally. He raised his eyebrows. She said sorry, sort of. One of those half apologies where she misses the kids more than she regrets what she said. He didn't ask what I was going to do. He already knew. She's not coming back around them. Not until she can look you in the eye and apologize like a grown woman. My dad didn't smile. He just nodded, like he approved, but didn't need to say it. Like he trusted me now, fully, not just as a son, but as a father. A few days later, Levi handed him a drawing. It was simple, crayons and printer paper. A picture of him and Grandpa standing next to the birdhouse, smiling. Underneath it, in big, crooked letters, it said, Grandpa is strong because he listens. My father stared at it for a long time. I watched his eyes mist up, just a little. Then he folded the paper carefully, like it was a letter from God himself, and tucked it into his shirt pocket. And just like that, the cycle broke. No screaming, no violence, just quiet, steady rebellion against a culture that said you had to be loud to matter. Patricia never called again. Not once. And in time, the family stopped asking questions. Maybe they didn't understand. Maybe they never would. But I didn't need them to. Because the man who taught me everything was right here, building birdhouses with my son, showing him that love doesn't brag, that real strength never needs to prove itself. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel torn. I didn't feel conflicted. I felt whole. I felt like a man standing in the shadow of a better man and casting a new one of my own. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone you love, you know how heavy that decision can be. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is break the silence for your family, for your children, and for yourself. If this story struck a chord with you, share your experience in the comments. Has someone in your family mistaken quietness for weakness? Let's talk about what real strength looks like and who taught us how to carry it.